Welcome to the Download, where we bring you discussion analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Wednesday, May 24th, 2023. I'm Brad Eli, here with my two co-hosts, Simon Rafe and Kyle Copey. And joining us today is a guest host, Nick Wiley. Hey, Nick.
What's up, Brad?
The sex abuse crisis, it really hasn't gone away. As much as modern-day bishops talk about transparency and progress, insisting all of this happened decades and decades ago, to quote Whirl, the problem of abusive priests is still very much with us today. To start things off, we'll be talking with one of our reporters, Dr. William Mahoney, about the Illinois Attorney General rolling out a massive report on clerical sex abuse. Dr. Mahoney, what's in this report?
This report was released yesterday by the Attorney General, like you said. It's 696 pages long. It names 451 clerics who abused children, which is in contradistinction to the earlier stuff released by the dioceses themselves that reported 103, and it names 1,997 children who were abused over the past 70 years. He also says, the Attorney General there, he also says that it shows decades and decades of cover-up by the church, re-scrambling and everything. We actually have a clip from his press release yesterday, if you can play that.
Before this investigation, the Catholic Diocese of Illinois publicly listed only 103 substantiated child sex abusers, which substantiated meaning that available evidence supported the conclusion that the cleric or religious brother committed child sex abuse. Now, by comparison, this report reveals the names and detailed information of 451 Catholic clerics and religious brothers who abuse at least 1,997 children across all of the dioceses in the state of Illinois. This means that our investigation led to the disclosure of 348 more clerics than prior to our investigation. Now, there are 149 clerics that this report discloses that are not disclosed by the diocese.
So, William, I don't find, how can that be? Because, you know, Cupich is saying, Cardinal Blaise Cupich, the Metropolitan in Chicago, released a statement yesterday about this. If I may read just one line from there, he says, all were reported to civil authorities. None were undisclosed. None were, quote, hiding in plain sight since at least 2002. Now, Raul seems to have his numbers pretty straight there. You know, and that leaves, if you take away 451 that Raul comes up with, only 103 that Cupich's team came up with from the diocese under him as a metropolitan, that left a whopping 348. Now, Cupich comes out and he says, oh, well, you know, 149, they were in religious orders. Well, Raul accounted for them, too. That brings us down to nearly 199, nearly 200 that were left unreported that had nothing to do with religious orders. Now, how can that be when Cupich comes out yesterday in the face of that and says, oh, we reported everybody? I mean, who's lying here?
Well, might I suggest that the Cardinal is not being completely forthright? He's obviously, I think that the investigation by the legal team, and they had tons of lawyers working on this, and this was something they did over, four and a half years. It started in 2018 under the previous Attorney General and just completed recently. I mean, it is very well documented, and they also talked to a lot of the survivors. I mean, mostly that's how they got their information. He says that in the press release as well, Raul there. He says that there was all these victims coming forward and talking. That's how they know it. They know most of what they know. So I would suggest probably the Cardinal's doing a little cover-up. Remember, this is the same Cardinal who won after the sex thing in the Vatican, the summit there. He was saying, well, the Pope doesn't want to go down a rabbit hole. He's got more important things to worry about, like climate change and, you know, whatever else. So
yeah, that was amazing when you talked about climate change, you know, and this whole clerical sex abuse thing. That's just a rabbit hole we don't want to go down. Yeah. But this report actually dwarfs the Pennsylvania grand jury report, which was the landmark report in 2018 in the Summer of Shame was just really stepping up there, and that I think had 300 abusers. This has 451. That had about 1,000 victims. This has over 1,000 victims. So this really is amazing that it's not only on par but eclipsing the previous report that was just dropped, you know, in 2018, and we thought, my goodness, how could it get any worse than that?
Yeah, honestly. And, you know, remember that before there was Bernadine there as well. And Supich actually credits Bernadine with coming up with better, you know, whatever policies for cracking down on sex abuse. I believe it was his stuff that became most of the meat of the Dallas Charter in 2002. So under Bernadine, like, the stuff was pretty rampant, no matter how they say they were putting up, you know, making better policies. Better policies for who? For them?
Well, yeah, they said that they started the that hotline in was it 2002, and he said that report that started a dramatic decrease in the number of cases. Well, yeah, because either you scare the victim off, or you pay them off to go away silently, or you somehow, you know, delete the files that were needed there. Supich in his report himself was saying, you know, these people aren't coming forward and telling us about it. Well, yeah, because you guys jimmy the numbers and cook the books of all the, you know what, where all the bodies are buried, so you know what reports to spike. So really just another sham act at transparency here, and it's really starting to become a little bit blatant. So
yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, I think Nick's got a question for you.
Yeah, so what do you think about the fact that, okay, we have almost 2,000, which is just an incredible number. Do you think that's anywhere close to how many there actually were in that time span?
In Illinois?
Yeah.
You know, it relies so heavily on people who do come forward, and, you know, and I'm sure some of them have also died since then. Some that were abused have died, and some people are going to be very afraid to come forward no matter what, or they just want to let it go. So I don't think the number is the exact amount of actual children, you know, now adults, but children who were abused by clergy. I'm sure there's more. I mean, how many? I don't know. I can only guess.
Yeah, I would assume that there's probably a good bit more, but also we have to always remember that these reports that are coming out really only take into account minors. This isn't just the only thing these priests are guilty of in terms of sexual deviancy. I mean, there's tons of other. I mean, imagine. I mean, maybe these same priests are committing other crimes against the Sixth Commandment, or other ones, or just committing them with adults. This isn't nearly the amount of sexual deviancy in the clergy.
Right. That's the deviant. I mean, that's the most deviant. I mean, it's completely disgusting to do that to a child, but I'm sure a lot of them are all, you know, you've got grinder problems we know about, and all kinds of other things. Who knows what some of these priests are doing? In Chicago, you have Boys Town, not too far from there, so there's a lot of opportunity if you are interested in those things.
Yeah, and we've reported on in the past about the gay seminarian pipeline that was running in Chicago. All these gay seminarians that were being funneled there, and other large metropolitans as well that are very popular, and so that they've just become hubs. And this is the places where we should be expecting this, because as we know, people try to say, you know, well, all gays aren't groomers and all, but I mean, it happens to be that these same homosexuals that we're allowing in the priesthood are who we, in fact, a lot of times see end up in these reports or have allegations against them.
I can tell you something anecdotal. I mean, when I was at the NAC, and I knew some guys who were absolutely not living a chaste life, and one of them, I won't say where or who, but when he was made a priest, and he was an active homosexual, and he was made a priest, you can't make this stuff up. He was actually made the chaplain to the Boy Scouts at the time. So I immediately thought, they're just begging for more abuse and more problems. So it's definitely going on. It's still going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a sad reality that we need to definitely pray for and do everything we can to rid ourselves of. But Brad?
Yeah, I'd like to say, William, you can't make this stuff up, and yet Supich is still making up stuff in his report here. So, well, thanks you very much for joining us, William, and discuss this sad story.
Yeah, it is sad. Thanks, Brad.
So this report hits really close to home for Supich. Now, he's kind of been on the main stage. He was the guy who was tapped by the Vatican in 2018 to host or to head up the sham sex summit in Rome. Let's give people some background here, just who Supich is. He's not just some other metropolitan, some other archbishop, or just another cardinal in this country.
America's Pope, huh?
Yeah. So in 2018, when the whole McCarrick thing broke in June and the summer of shame, everybody's like hashtag Catholic Me Too. If you ever want a whole rundown of all the people who've been, we had way more reports than we could even write by our little staff, just coming in, all of the information coming in, and we're just trying to put this stuff up on site as fast as we could, and we were not coming. 1 in 10 stories getting reported. So it was an avalanche at that time. Everything revolved around McCarrick and the knockoff of all of that, and who all knew his rise to power. He was just in the spotlight. It was so much kerfuffle about that the Assembly of the General Assembly, the USCCB, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, in Baltimore in November, had said, we want to get to the bottom of this. Who knew? How did McCarrick rise to power? Let's get to the bottom of this. Rome steps in through the nuncio, Christophe Pierre, and says, no, you're not going to talk about this. Hey, what about the synodal way, guys? In one of the peripheries out here.
How could they, when most of these guys were either ordained by McCarrick or they were put in power by him or someone who was close to him that was in his ear to tell Rome, like, oh, this is the guy you want to be bishop? How could they possibly investigate how McCarrick came into all this whenever they're the guys who were there, a lot of them, because of McCarrick?
Yeah, it was a MAD, mutual assured destruction. It would take place, and the crater would be massive. So the solution by Rome, when they said, don't talk about it here, we're going to bring this up in February at a summit in Rome. We're going to cover all the questions. Well, McCarrick never came up there, and who all knew about it, and the whole rise of all that stuff was just squelched. And who was the guy that was put in charge of that summit was Supich. So Supich is the guy who is like America's Pope, like you say, and for whatever reason, he was tapped to be the guy that would cover all this stuff. So now when I say this hits pretty close to home, that's in the 6th diocese, of which he's the metropolitan. He's the overseeing, he's the Archbishop of Chicago there of the dioceses of Illinois, the 6th diocese. So.
Well, he's had enough cover up himself. I mean, there was a story we reported years ago about him covering up for Bernardine. There was the story about the allegations against Bernardine that were unreported that Supich knew about. So there's a whole investigation into that. If you read the report that just came out, there's different things against Cardinal George, who was another predecessor of Supich, who, of course, I don't think was necessarily going out and saying, oh, yeah, our ex-Cardinal George, he was covering up all this stuff. He wasn't really championing that. So, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where if you're in bed with all of us and you're protecting everybody, then that's how you rise to power.
In bed was a Freudian slip metaphor there going on.
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, that could be the case. Look, I mean, if you actually look at this, you've got the situation where obviously McCarrick was engaged in, abusive actions, homosexual actions and stuff. It's very difficult to sustain the idea that none of the hierarchy, the upper hierarchy, the bishops, are involved in this in one way or another. Michael Voris has sat in that chair and said, that he's got it from bishops to saying, yes, there are fellow bishops who are gay and don't have a problem with that. Okay, well, what does gay mean? I mean, in a very real sense, what does it mean? Does it just mean that they, have same-sex attraction? Does it mean that they're actively engaged in it? When you have, this was the whole business with Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood. There was that whole business there, and there were these actresses, adult women actresses, who were being pressured into sex with him. And many people were like, well, why doesn't the woman just say no? Why doesn't she just scream rape? Why doesn't she just, pull the mace out of a person, like, hose down the creep with caustic acid? And it's like, well, there's a power dichotomy there, between the producer who can make and break your career, of the little girl from Kansas who wants to star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, in the same way as, like, the bishop can make or break your career if you're a seminarian, if you're a young priest and you're this thing. And that's what was happening, with these young men. That was the case with McCarrick. And as we just saw with this whole business of the report, you brought it up, Nick. doesn't cover anything adult. If you're over 18, you were a seminarian, you got pressured into some sexual deviancy with the rector, with his priest, with whoever. This report doesn't cover it.
And I mean, how can you not expect that when some of the most notorious ones were very high ranking in the U.S. church? Like there's Bernardine, there's Weakland, there's Spellman. There are guys right now who are high up who many allegations against them that they are in fact homosexuals. Yeah. And yeah, so you've seen this time and time again where these guys who had a lot of power in the U.S. are either gay or extremely gay friendly.
Well, that's so much so that the Catholic Me Too, when Harvey Weinstein came out, it was the hashtag Me Too.
Yep.
And so much closeness to that because of the power structure you're talking about here. You don't play ball, you don't get ordained. You're not going to be, your vocation is ended, and you're going to be blackballed at all the seminaries. So it became known as hashtag Catholic Me Too. Very, very close, similar dichotomy. And that's the sad thing even about this report here that's coming out, this just came out. Great, kudos, good job. But it all talks about minors, the focus on minors. It has nothing to do with this power structure that was all about the McCarrick era, that he takes the seminarians to his little cottage and fondles them. And if they don't play ball there, Bishop Lopes and others said, we all knew.
We all knew what was going on.
There's two things going on here when you talk about the abuse of power perpetrated by the Catholic hierarchs. You have those who, like we just brought up, those who are actually involved in the sexual abuse itself. But then you also have those who are not, who are heterosexual men, but they don't act like virile heterosexual men. They don't stand up for what's right. They move these guys around. They won't speak out for fear of losing a promotion or whatever. They're feckless men, really, is what they are. They don't have any backbone. They might not be perpetrating it themselves, but they'll do the cover up. They'll go along. They'll toe the party line, and that's exactly we don't know what the status of Supich is, which category he falls into there. People speculate one side or the other, but even going back to 2018 with Supich, and Dr. Mahoney brought this up when we were talking to him. We actually have a clip of that infamous interview where Supich is being asked about, well, how far does this stuff rise up in terms of the hierarchy? Does the Pope know about it? Is the Pope going to do anything about it? And I think we have that clip. We can go to that right now.
The Pope has a bigger agenda. He's got to get on with other things of talking about the environment and protecting migrants and carrying on the work of the church. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole on this.
So,
wow.
yeah.
To me, right there, that is so telling that he would say clerical sex abuse affecting, destroying how many thousands of lives, wrecking all of these vocations, because once you're compromised as a priest, you're never going to have your backbone. You're always under the thumb. You want to call something out, we'll yank it. You're a compromised individual. And he's just calling all of that for decades and decades, just a rabbit hole, and climate change is more important to get on with. Dude, when you're saying that, okay, well, that's the problem.
Yeah, there's one thing that he said that I think is particularly just pretty grotesque, and just kind of trying to shift blame and everything in his statement that he released on this AG report. He says that the AG said, church is more worthy of investigation because it is a trusted religious organization. We think, the Archdiocese of Chicago, all children deserve to be protected regardless of whether they are cared for by a religious or secular institution. It isn't fair or wise to focus only on the Catholic Church, which has made the greatest strides in this area. And that's something that really aggravates me. I hate when people's response to the Catholic abuse thing is, oh, well, it happens everywhere. It happens in Protestant circles, it happens in secular institutions, the Muslims do it, all that. No, if we are the ones who are the truth and the way to salvation, it is absolutely the most imperative and just the most disgusting that we would do something like this. We should absolutely be the focus. If anybody's doing sex abuse and it should be covered most harshly, it should be us. We should own that.
Yeah.
Sanctimonious deflection comes to mind.
Well, also, I think, I'm reminded, I think it was Babyface Nelson, who was a famous bank robber during the Great Depression, was asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. And it's like...
Wise man.
Well, he was just a sensible fellow. He was also, I think he would kind of be sort of some modern-day Robin Hood on the basis he used to go around and find people's debt instruments and destroy them, thereby forgiving people's debt. But regardless of that, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Why do you investigate the Catholic Church for sex abuse? Because that is where the sex abuse is happening. So there's a very famous statement that I think Supich made and said this is happening decades and decades ago. That would be a lie. That would be a fib. If you remember, what happened was around about 2001. It was 2001, 2002. The infamous Spotlight report came out from the Boston Globe, and it would have come out earlier, but 9/11 happened. The Twin Towers fell after the terrorist attack in 2001, and the reporters were delayed in being able to publish, so they published later. But that was, 22 years ago. That was a generation ago, and that was looking back at a lot of things. And of course, the whole thing that came out of that was, okay, yes, this is a thing that had happened. This is a thing that was happening, but no more. Things will change. Things will go on. Okay, so let's just take a look at these. Just 3 articles that we've got here. This is from January 8th, 2023, which you will recognize is barely months and months, let alone decades and decades ago. Catholic priests who formerly served in Charleston indicted on federal sex abuse charges. We also have this one dating back from last year, October the 6th, by a lady that you may have heard of, Christine Niles. I think she does good work. She does decent enough work.
She sits here sometimes.
Does she? Wow, why is she not sitting here today? It would make my view so much nicer. Anyway, she did this great article. It's on our website. Kansas confirms new child porn probe into Father James Jackson FSSP. And again, this was a new child porn probe. He'd already been done, so that's only a couple of months ago. And this one from a couple of years ago, but close to home here, 5 Catholic priests charged in Michigan sex abuse investigation. This is just the tip of the iceberg, the article says. So those are just 3 articles, and those are like all within this decade. This is not decades and decades ago. Nothing has changed. It's still happening. These are existing cases.
The adult cases where the priests are clericalizing each other, and also the Jackson case where there's porn involved. Supich actually stood up at the Assembly of Bishops in Baltimore, fall of 2018, when all this was being discussed. And he said those things should be handled separately because sometimes you have consenting adults. So therefore that should be not considered, sexual abuse and all of this. The whole Harvey Weinstein thing, well, they kind of sort of consented, sort of.
Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done with this lie. I am done with this lie about consenting adults when there is a power dichotomy. There is no consent when you are both part of the same organization and there is a power differential. Consent at that point is at best damaged. If, within Hollywood, there's a producer and there's some actress, okay, consent is diminished. That you have a situation where there is in a work environment, you have the executive and the secretary, okay, there is a power differential. Consent is at best diminished. This is why the United States military and every other military worthy of the name does not allow fraternization, as they call it, between officers and enlisted personnel, because there is a power differential there. That's the whole point. This is why the vast majority of businesses out there have a no fraternization policy at work, because there is always a power differential there. And it's very, very, very difficult to not have that situation there. It's just ripe and open for abuse. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done with people coming along and saying, oh, these seminarians, they should have stood up, they should have screamed, they should have yelled, they should have just, punched the guy in the teeth. And I'm done with this.
Yeah, and that... To your point, we had 2 vortexes, I think it was last week or whatever, where Mike and I sat down right here at this table and we talked about the Archdiocese of Baltimore and the report that just had come out with them. And so you had Archbishop Lori who, the report comes out, there's all these terrible things in the report. We talked about that for a day. And the next day we brought a concrete case that only we really know about, the the party involved sent us all of their receipts, all their documents, and we talked about it in a whole vortex about how this one seminarian who really thought he was being called to be a priest, all he wanted to do was, go love God, seek out his vocation. And in minor seminary, it's a priest on the staff who's harassing him over and over again, and no one's helping him. He's going to all the different authorities that he should be going to and reporting this to. All of them are giving him the runaround, making false promises. He gets out of there, he graduates, and then he goes to major seminary, thinks everything's going to be great because now that priest that's on staff, he's still at the minor seminary, doesn't have to see him anymore. He gets there, and now another person who has power over him, a transitional deacon at the seminary, is now abusing him and harassing him and trying to do all these different gay things with him. And he's once again telling all the power structures involved. Lori admits to knowing this. We have a letter from Lori saying, yes, we've received both of your parents' letters detailing all this stuff, and you're refusing to cooperate in these ways. And so that's what we're seeing. And the biggest thing is they know who to target. They are really good at this. They know with fairly well certainty who is going to fight back, who is going to struggle, who will not put up with it. And so they pick those people out. Who are the guys who want this too bad, who aren't going to say something because they want their vocation, or who are the guys who are just, a little too weak, a little too awkward to speak up. They're very good at pinpointing who it is they're going to victimize, and that's why this stuff never comes out until way later.
Well, a lot of that victimized targeting, a lot of that happens at the level of vocation director. We talked about it. What men are tapped. If you look at Goodbye Good Men from Rose, Michael Rose wrote a great in-depth documentary on this whole dynamic of who's tapped, who's said no to. And I knew about this back in the 90s. Bishop Curtis of Omaha, actually, you can still find it on the website, came out with a great statement. Our Sunday Visitor actually reported it. And he was saying he knows that vocation directors are turning away good vocations. At the time, it was for they could have married priests, women priests, and all this type of thing. But also they're turning away good men for the sake of you have a backbone. You would be standing on your own 2 feet. You would call out evil. You would resist evil. And one of the things that happened with the rise of the homosexual network in the church, you have homosexuals by their very nature. Father Darius Oko in Poland, he did a report for Pope Benedict, talked about the homosexual network, homosexual mafia in the church. He was commissioned by the Pope to do this, so that's who he is. And Darius Oko, you can find him on our site. And he was saying one of the hallmarks of the homosexual men is that they're not really men. They're not Christ warriors who will stand up and defend. So they're going to amalgamate to themselves people who are malleable, who are mealy-mouthed, who are, no backbone. And that's the type of men they've been accruing in the priesthood for decades.
Yeah. I was discussing this, a couple days ago?
That's exactly right, yeah. So that whole dynamic has been going on for a long time. So actually you have lots of pickings out there by men who won't say anything, won't stand up, won't call out if their fellow seminarian says, hey, I was just abused or whatever.
Well, it's really just, as we said before, and we could say 1,000 times during the show, it's really just going to be the tip of the iceberg. Because this started, go back to the Boston Globe, you can go back to 2018. My prediction is there's going to be diocese after diocese, attorneys general after attorneys general, doing these types of investigations, all these different states. And my question is, which diocese is next to do this type of investigation, and what are they going to uncover? I mean, this is a nationwide thing.
Well, this isn't the dioceses, though, doing the investigation. This is not like some great report that Cardinal Supich has come around and gone, friends, in the sacristy of the cathedral, I have found an ancient relic of the church. It is my spine. And I have found my spine and reinstalled it, and now I have done an investigation, and close to 500 of my priests that we haven't put. No, this was done by the Attorney General of Illinois. We're relying on some, career politician prosecutor who just wants to sit there, put in his 4 or 5 as Attorney General, go get a nice cushy white shoe law firm job, right? And he's having to do it? This is what I'm relying on?
and the worst part is that it's these very far left Democrat attorney generals who are the ones we're relying on to do these reports. That is the most sad thing. That's what we've been seeing recently. Is like these attorney generals are not like some gung-ho conservative trying to like get this stuff out there. These are liberal Democrats who are like, who are the ones investigating,
who are arguably wanting to do it to take down the church.
Sure. They have their ulterior motives, but the thing is that we have to, like I said, we cannot be afraid of calling these things out. And sins against the Sixth Commandment in the clergy are nothing new at all. There are writings about this in like the church fathers and the early councils. They're like, dudes, stop sleeping with freaking prostitutes and like all this stuff. It might not have been like this homosexual thing.
Well, Peter Damian's day, it was the homosexual.
There's that too. But yeah, there's a lot of things with like women and stuff. Like it's arguably maybe a lot worse in today's era. We don't really know because of just how public everything is now. But there's always been these things. And I mean, it's one of the hardest things to talk about and to evangelize with people. Like whenever, that's one of the things they're going to bring up every time when someone's not Catholic. Oh, what about all the abuse in the church? And working here, it's been my favorite thing is because I can be like, yeah, it's what I do every day as I talk about it. And so that's like the rebuttal that I get to have. That's like, whew, that's like a question that's like kind of, okay, we could get past that point because yes, I am calling it out every day. And that's what everyone should be doing. And that's what these establishment medias with the Catholics and just your normal everyday Catholic or the priest who is like pretty Orthodox and all that stuff, he doesn't want to talk about this because like, oh, we need to get past that. It's different things. It's like, no, these are statistically speaking, probably not a small number of people have been affected in your own congregation who are living with this, who have maybe never spoken about it, who have this hurt, this anger and all this pain, and we refuse to own up to it. And the best we can do is give you our money.
Well, I think, there's probably a lot of people who are not in the congregation who've been affected by it because maybe they haven't been abused themselves, but somebody they knew, a family member, etc., has been directly impacted by this. And then those people are not in the congregation because they've given the church the heave-ho. Now, fine, they've given the church the heave-ho for a terrible reason. They have left Jesus because of Judas. But you know what? I do understand that, and it is a legitimate reason. If I were to sit here and go, well, that's a stupid, dumb reason, so gloss over it, doesn't magically bring them back to the church. There's not somebody who's like, yeah, my son was abused and I got absolutely nothing, and there's some poor woman who hasn't been back to the church for 20 years. Me saying, well, you've left Jesus for Judas, that doesn't get her to come back. I don't know how to get her to come back.
Yeah, how do you tell a kid that was molested his whole childhood, if no salvation outside the church, you better stay in the church, you're not going to make it. How do you tell a kid that? How do you tell someone who's been molested and lied to by all of the people that they were supposed to be able to count on their whole life, and then tell them, oh yeah, but you got to stick it out, you got to endure with the church?
Yeah.
Well, the other fallout of that, you have generations of feckless men who are compromised, who are not going to be up there on the pulpit fervently calling out mortal sin, saying there's a hell, saying you've got to live according to the gospel teachings or you're going to go to hell, and have that backbone and that fervor and that fire. And so it affects their liturgy, the way they say Mass, the way they carry themselves. It's not just one little isolated component of their life. If they're a compromised, broken individual that was himself abused or compromised or knew too much, or I know about this going on but I can't say anything, that affects the whole personality of that priest. And we've had generations and generations of this going on. And we're in a pretty deep hole right now.
And those are the type of people that are in the hierarchical leadership of the church right now. Getting back to another controversial character, Cardinal Cupich. Just earlier this month, so before this, the report came out, Cardinal Cupich was out there touting how the archdiocese, his archdiocese, is so transparent, is so on the forefront, the cutting edge of combating sexual abuse. We actually have a clip of Cardinal Cupich saying just this about how his whole program is so transparent. I think we can cut to that now.
It's part of our commitment to transparency. You really can't be assured that we're transparent if, in fact, the language does not come across as understandable.
Okay, yeah.
So the language needs to be understandable, Brad. That's
Okay.
all you need to do, and everything's going to be okay.
His statement yesterday that came out, we got to read a little clip from that, part of that. One of the persons that he's never reported was Bernardin. You mentioned Joseph Bernardin earlier on. We need to go there for a minute. This is part of his statement. I just made it bigger because I can read it without glasses and all this. The Archdiocese has, now this is very important, the Archdiocese has, to our knowledge, that's a little buzzword that I can lie right here and I don't need to go to confession for that. The Archdiocese has, to our knowledge, reported all allegations of child sexual abuse by clergy to civil authorities, including the oldest allegations. The oldest, going all the way back 90 years. So this is everybody. Even Bernardin, who was from 82 to 96, okay, his predecessor took over in Chicago from 82 to 96. He died in 96. We report, Supich continues, these allegations, whether the accused is alive or dead, like Bernardin's dead, we consider an allegation to have been made even if the report is made anonymously, has incomplete facts such as the name of priest or parish, or has been made by a third party. We report all such allegations. This came out in his statement yesterday. He's saying this. To civil authorities, it's important to emphasize that to our knowledge, buzzwords again, I can lie here without having to go to confession, to our knowledge, there are no hidden, undisclosed, or unreported allegations, that's what the AG was accusing him of child sexual abuse by the clergy of the Archdiocese. Well, he wasn't including his predecessor, Cardinal Joseph Bernardin, who, as you were talking about earlier, had allegations of raping a minor in a satanic ritual when as a priest in the Carolinas. So, this allegation was reported to the Chicago Archdiocese, to the U.S. Papal Nuncio, to the Vatican Secretariat of State, and to the Papal Household, which is where we would actually write letters to also, if you want to get to John Paul II back in the day. Bishop Harvey, I believe, Monsignor Harvey was the guy of the Papal Household. So that was kind of a little inroad there. So that's what you would do back in the day. So anyway, 2019, CM, we have a clip of this. CM covered in 2019 in a special report, Bernardin, the Archbishop of Chicago, this whole sordid affair. Let's take a listen to that.
According to the documentation, the sexual assault happened on the property of St. Mary's Parish in Greenville, South Carolina, and involved both then Father Bernardin and Bishop John J. Russell, and was part of a satanic ritual involving desecration of the Holy Eucharist. The victim eventually contacted the Archdiocese of Chicago in April of 1993, first by phone and later in writing to report the rape by Bernardin. Those letters are contained in this file. As can be seen in this document, the victim had ongoing communication with the Archdiocese of Chicago Professional Fitness Review Administrator Steve Sidlowski. The victim even signed and sent a registered letter written directly to Bernardin, making the serious accusations and asking him to go public and repent. A copy of the registered mail receipt, along with the original letter, was also provided to Church Militant.
Stephen Brady, Roman Catholic Faithful Yeoman's work, a lot of that came, they were leaders in uncovering sex abuse in the church, actual heroes in the church, and we worked with guys like that. So kudos to Stephen Brady and others who contributed to that. These are actual documents. It's not hearsay. It's not, hey, I heard that. Oh, I got an email somewhere. These are actual documents with the protocol numbers on, and this is where it went to, and this is the response of them, and this is their letterhead, and a whole stack of file about all this. Wasn't that an allegation that was reported that should be made known, even if it had something that wasn't quite kosher with it? Bernardin was not. Well, Bernardin's name came up in Raul's report, the AG's report, 40 times in the 696 pages. 40 times that he came up. And he's the guy that, in his statement, you know, Supich says, oh, you know, Bernardin, great guy, you know, he started this whole review board. I know all these allegations go to that review board, and then again, it just gets filtered down, and what do they actually know? What can they prove? Can we pay them off on the side? Can we scare them? Whatever. And there's hair-raising stories about things that have come out of the Chicago Archdiocese about priests that have committed suicide, you know, stabbing themselves in the groin 26 times. I kid you not. So anyway, 40 times and this is what the report, AG report says, that Bernadine was shuffling priests around who were known to have abused children. So why did Bernadine's name never come up and still has not come up and won't come up from Cupich? That's a question for Cupich. That's a rabbit hole maybe he should crawl down.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that even in his own report, talking about Bernadine, back in the 1990s, you were saying he commissioned that report. That report found that, as you said, his own archdiocese, his own actions were reprehensible. The report kind of backfired on him, and again, yeah, why Cupich didn't report that is beyond me. Again, Cupich is talking about this whole idea of transparency. You know, we're on the cutting edge as the archdiocese. Really, I mean, a counterexample would be, well, why the heck do you have such a big discrepancy between the number of victims that you report, the number of perpetrators that you reported and the actual number of perpetrators, which is probably far greater than we even know. Why such a big discrepancy there if you're being so transparent? Again, these are just the ones that we know. Now, again, we kind of alluded to this earlier, they sort of play this legal maneuver where they're like, well, those particular perpetrators, the ones that we didn't actually officially report, were from religious orders, and they're their own separate thing. You know, we don't have to report them. Really, why wouldn't you report them? If you're trying to be transparent, why wouldn't you include those that you technically don't have to report?
Yeah, the whole thing is just kind of ridiculous. And as well, I want to get back to this point of the distinction that's being made, and the distinction is being made. I understand why Kwame Raoul, because from Illinois, the Democrat is doing this, the leftist is doing this, making the distinction between adult sexual contact between priests and seminarians and each other and so forth, and child sex abuse. Okay, I understand why he's doing that, because you know what? He doesn't want to come along and go, gay sex is bad. He doesn't want to come out and say gay sex is sinful, is wrong, is it? He doesn't think that. That's not talking point of his party. That's not his political stance. So that's why they're doing it. They're concentrating on something that is absolutely, yes, this is a criminal act. It is sex abuse. But let's actually talk about this larger problem that you've got. As Cupich says, well, some of these are consensual. Again, I've said, well, there's
in front of his fellow bishops at the General Assembly in 2018.
Some of these are consensual, but there is that power differential.
And the whole porn thing, that's another whole issue too, so we won't worry about that.
So we had an article, again, from, the lady who normally sits there and is much better looking than you, from Christine Niles back in September 2018. This is about Casa Jesus, which is in Illinois, and this was shut down. After 28 years in operation, Casa Jesus was quietly shut down by Cardinal Blaise Cupich in 2016 following multiple homosexual scandals, with 3 seminarians expelled after being caught going to a gay bar, and the rector himself, Octavio Munoz, arrested for male child porn on his laptop. Then we have a quote here: "When I was at Casa Jesus, I used to go to gay bars, bring my friends. They didn't say anything," said former seminarian Louis Stalin, real name, to NBC Chicago. Stalin said the rule for celibacy was often ignored. So, bearing in mind, rule for celibacy often ignored, that's kind of, okay, that's like how the Catholic would say. This is as you said repeatedly, this is a violation of the 6th commandment. This is a sin against the 6th commandment. It is happening with clerics and seminarians. It's a big deal. It's a big problem. We've got all this, gay stuff going on. They're going to gay bars, they're hanging out, going to the bathhouses, doing whatever that, gay seminarians do, sitting there sipping sherry, painting each other's toenails, etc. But also, you've got the rector with child porn on his laptop. Okay, that's not consensual. Children they are incapable of consenting to engage in pornographic material. They're incapable of consenting to have sex. If they were capable of consenting, they wouldn't consent because it's abuse. So these are real people, and it's really happening. That puts paid to Cupich's whole thing of like, oh well, this is pornography and it's not quite the same thing. This is consensual activity. It's like there's a power difference. It was a cringy
statement when he made it, and everybody's like, ew. But he's got the levers of power. The bishops there know that. I would like to go to what we thought was going to be the solution in 2019. Coming out of the summer of shame 2018, where do we go? 2019. The big word was RICO. We got the name RICO, Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organization Act. How does RICO, if you didn't tune in back in 2019, how did that affect? That was a federal investigation when the sex abuse crosses state lines, when money payoffs go straight across state line, when it's an international thing, it's what do you call conspiracy, okay, to cover up and to commit these crimes, moving priests around who you knew abused somebody here and they went over and you reassigned him in another state. RICO kicks in again. All these things would trigger a RICO investigation. Everybody was like, well, you got to have a RICO investigation. This is going to happen. FBI, you know, upper agency, some little compartment that wasn't compromised, okay, was saying, yeah, you know, they're going to be pulling the switch on this type of thing. And Church Militant really was on the fore. I mean, we were talking with FBI agents and all sorts of stuff back in 2019. Lots of inside scoop right then. Well, then it just sort of fizzled and didn't really hear much more about it. And whatever happened to that? Well, I have a working theory. And there is a détente that's set up between the left. Yeah, you can put out a report like this. You know, a lot of those people are dead, have been retired, or in convalescent home. Doesn't really, you know, and you can downplay some of the, you know, more money paid out or whatever. That's coming from the pew sitters out there anyway, not Supich's back pocket. It's good. They should have done the reporting, but is it going to solve everything? No, you got to have a federal investigation. You got to open up everybody's coffers of all your documents. You're talking about who can investigate. You have to rely on all this investigation going on. This investigation could have taken half a day with all the files opened up in all the secret archives. Every diocese has secret archives. You got all the information. That's only one dossier right there. You pull it out. Who's on your roster there? Thank you. 5 more dioceses to go. We're done in an afternoon, guys. Thank you for cooperating. And then we start from there. What happened when some dioceses in 2019 were getting busted, like down in Dallas? Who was the head of? I can see him right there. Archbishop down in Texas, anyway. Not going to get any help here.
Gustavo in San Antonio.
Not Gustavo, no. The good guy, the DiNardo. And his diocese gets busted. And they come in and they scoop up all of his files and everything, taking him away, right? So now you're starting to do these investigations like just cold, just busting into dioceses and start taking files all over the place.
Did that with Saginaw, didn't they? Well, I think they kicked down the door of Saginaw, didn't they?
I think so.
Saginaw happened. There's about 3 or 4 or 5
Bishop Schroeder, God rest his soul.
Yeah, Bishop Schroeder. Anyway, you're getting all of that. RICO should have happened. Why not? Because you've got the bishops can say, well, this Eucharistic coherence thing, we're going to start saying you can't receive communion. And the diocese, the feds, the Democrats, who were always in the tank for giving the money to the blue belly bishops, are like, well, we'll dry up your money stream if you do that. Or you're going to wind up in jail if we do a RICO investigation. So both sides are kind of got this détente where we're not going to call you out for being a pro-abort politician and no one's going to vote for you because the Catholic vote holds sway for the last how many elections?
And we have to, you know, do your immigration as well. We have to like house your immigrants and send them places and tell our people, oh, you have to take them in. Like,
that's true.
Lower the threshold of like Catholic teaching on that.
So there's this mutual destruction between politicians and bishops. Both of them came from Catholic homes that didn't raise them too well back in the contraceptive years. Boomers are too busy contracepting rather than raise their kids well. So that's a problem, you know, and that problem, I don't see a solution, but we're right in the midst of this Eucharistic revival and coherence and all that. And the whole elephant in the living room is, when are you going to tell the pro-abort politicians like Pelosi and Biden you can't receive communion anymore?
I think this is going to, there's going to be something that's going to bring this to a head, and it's going to like get rid of that. And I think that ultimately comes down to money. So recently there have been 2 dioceses in California who have either declared bankruptcy or are going to do so. The first one is Oakland. So the Diocese of Oakland in California, which is under Bishop Michael Barber, on May the 8th, just gone, they filed for bankruptcy. We reported on it there. You can see there. So that's what. And these are dioceses are not small potatoes. Dioceses are not just like some little, you know, mom and pop store there. These are, you know, this is a lot of money there. And now they're bankrupt, which means they can't pay their bills. Why are they bankrupt? Well, okay, obviously they're bankrupt because they're paying out, you know, a lot of settlements and so forth on this. And arguably as well, they're bankrupt because I don't know if this happened in California, but a lot of places have kind of squirreled the money away and they've hidden it in places that can't be touched by the bankruptcy. Then we've got San Diego. Again, San Diego is like, okay, name like 3 cities in California. San Diego is in the top 3. It always is, you know. It's a big city. there, they are saying they will be declaring bankruptcy in the fall. I don't know really, how you're going to be declaring bankruptcy. I mean, they may find some money behind the back of the sofa or something like that, but this is why I'm not a bishop, and I'm in fact heterosexual. You've got these two dioceses in California. California is not a poor state. California is a rich state. It has rich people in it. It's got a lot of Catholics in it. When you think about it, these dioceses are large places that have a lot of money coming in from various investments and endowments and, just the donations from the people in the pew. These are places coming in with money. Obviously, when you've got a lot of people, you've got a lot of priests, you've got a lot of opportunity for this kind of problems and having to pay people off because of that. But ultimately, I think that's the way this is going to go. It's eventually just going to go and like, dude, there is no more money. There are no more dioceses. They've just declared bankruptcy, that this has just become too expensive and something's going to have to give. You can't get the bishops to care about this on moral issues because they have no moral framework. But I'm sure you can get them to care about it on money on the basis they're venial and greedy.
Well, really, bad press and lawsuits are the only thing that makes a bishop move. But the fact is, when I hear about bankruptcies, my hackles just go up, because the inside scoop on bankruptcies is that you can hide truth and you can hide cash. Not just cash, but truth. And as you said, squirreling money away. I need to pay all this out. Well, what if I don't have much to pay out because I have a $30 million endowment fund to the cemetery? I can't touch that. And there's the Mooney Holdings now that holds all this. And I'm just going to say this little parish church is on the hook for that. And all of this accounting games are going on and have been going on for 20 years now, leading into all these. What else happens at the bankruptcy? Once you declare bankruptcy, it's like, okay, I don't need to have any more disclosure. I don't need to have any trials. You're just paid on pennies. How many times were you abused? 15? Okay, well, there's $1,000 per 15. That's what we agreed upon. The court lawyer, the bankruptcy lawyer, is in charge of that. So these people don't get any justice in the financial aspect. They have no closure with regard to the truth that this guy was proven guilty, that he did this to me 15, 20, 25 years ago, and I was right all along, and they covered it up all. None of that comes to the light at all. It's even more about covering up the truth than it is about that. And a lot of dioceses are just better at hiding money and getting it to the point where you consider bankruptcy and all this stuff's gone away, and nobody really died and got, we just reorganize and get along with our show. And doesn't affect the Supage's back pocket, doesn't affect the parishes, they don't close. I mean, ultimately, you're right. I mean, the fact that, when there's no money and there's nobody going, but I think it's going to dry up from the fact that no one's going to be evangelized and there's nobody getting Catholics in the pews anymore. I mean,
again, it's a lack of transparency on the part of these dioceses, and it relates to something I said before when it comes to, okay, which diocese is going to be next type of thing, which AG is going to investigate next. It's the same thing with the bankruptcies. Which diocese is going to declare bankruptcy next, because they're doing all these payouts, like we said. But when it comes to, those kind of payouts happen, mainly in the civil realm. But when it comes to the state prosecuting these individuals, people might look at this situation in Illinois and say, well, are any of these priests going to get prosecuted? But from what I understand, there's really none of them are actually active anymore. You might have some retired ones, but I think the majority of them are actually dead. So there's really no prosecution there. And then the other situation, besides the dead people, well, what about the ones that are still alive? Can we still prosecute them? The guys that are rolling around in nursing homes maybe, and the victims are willing to come forward. Can we prosecute them? And there's the whole issue of the statute of limitations. These happened decades and decades ago, right? Fortunately, states like California, states like New York have something called the look-back window as to where they've opened up that time frame where these victims can come forward and actually, it would sort of override that statute of limitations. Is that going to happen in Illinois? I don't know.
See, we're getting the wrap-up signal, but I don't care. This is another bee in my bonnet, because I've had one today. I'm going to have another one. Statute of limitations is garbage. It is bad law. It is bad principle. It is terrible idea. Okay? Statute of limitations for all crimes should be overturned. There should be no statute of limitations. I don't care if you stole a candy bar. You should be able to be prosecuted 25, 30, 50, 100 years later. Now, The whole point is, completely removing the statute of limitations only works in countries which have a good, reliable justice system, which, despite everything, the United States still does, because you have the presumption of innocence unless you are proven guilty. Many of these people, we have evidence, we have solid evidence that these people did it. You could prove it in a court of law, but it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you missed your window by 2 weeks, a year. I've seen this so many times on Law and Order SVU. You know what? They didn't get nearly as upset. They just said, oh, we've got 3 days to sort this case. And you know what they did? Because that's a Dick Wolf procedural. This isn't a Dick Wolf procedural. It's real life, and people are getting absolutely messed over. If I was born in this country, I would run for president on that one point. Overturn the statute of limitations. It's garbage. There, I'm done. Close the show.
Well, whether it be justice in this lifetime or only in the next remains to be seen. But thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now, please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Salve
Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve, ad te clamamus exules fili eve, ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes in hac lacrimarum vale, ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, o clemens, o pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria.
Amen. Patris et Filius Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.